Hi everyone, I am Police Captain Noricia Larines, your Panyerong Police, and today I'm going to discuss human rights and human rights-based policing. This junction represents a pivotal concern for the Philippine National Police. Allegations of human rights violations have caused concern among PNP personnel. However, it's important to remember that protecting human rights is a key part of our job. Enforcing the law and keeping the peace means we must always respect the rights of every citizen. Question: what is human rights? Human rights refer to the basic rights and freedoms that all human beings have. Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of sex, race, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. Everyone is entitled to these rights without discrimination. Yet, despite their importance, many misconceptions surround human rights, which can hinder their understanding and protection. Some misconceptions on human rights are the following. Some in the PNP believe that it is only a propaganda used by the enemy against the government. Some say that human rights is being used by some sectors just to harass the police. Some also say that human rights only protect anti-government activists and do not benefit the PNP. It is only a hindrance to the PNP operations. It is an obstacle to mission accomplishment. Now, what will happen if we don't reach the gap? The PNP loses the trust and confidence of the community. The PNP suffers criticism from other sectors. Our relationship with international community is affected. Human rights violations are committed. PNP personnel could also face administrative or criminal charges, and worst, it could end up police career. Overcoming these misconceptions is essential for police organizations to institutionalize human rights principles, thereby transforming policing into a practice that respects human dignity, ensures accountability, and fosters public trust and democratic governance. Now let's move on to human rights-based policing. What is human rights-based policing, or HRBP? It is the comprehensive, systematic, and institutional adherence to national or domestic laws on human rights. It is also an approach to policing that defines the relationship between the individual citizens and various groups or sectors of society as claim holders, whose rights have to be respected and protected by the police. And the police, as duty holders, have obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights. Human rights-based policing is considered to be institutionalized when human rights principles and practices are taught and applied at all levels, in both operational and administrative functions of the police organization. Listed below are characteristics of human rights-based policing. First, strict observance of police operational procedures. Second, adherence to national or domestic and international laws, treaties, standards, and protocols on human rights. Third, professional competence and courteous service. Fourth, respect for the rule of law and civilian supremacy. And fifth, pro-democracy and pro-citizen. Strict observance of police operational procedures. Human rights-based policing entails strict observance of policies and operational procedures. Violations of human rights occur when police officers do not follow established policies and procedures. Shortcuts, omissions, or blatant disregard for procedures are unacceptable behavior that violate our national laws, PNP rules and regulations, and generally accepted socio-cultural norms. Adherence to national or domestic and international laws, treaties, standards, and protocols on human rights. Human rights-based policing is about adhering to international standards of human rights in law enforcement. All PNP personnel must know, understand, and adhere to Philippine laws related to human rights. There are at least 10 basic international human rights standards for law enforcement that all police organizations around the world must strive to attain. By adhering to international standards, the PNP is able to comply with a uniform set of principles and practices that is expected from all police officers by the international community. Professional competence and courteous service. Human rights-based policing is demonstrated through professional competence and courtesy. Upholding human rights is very similar to the Golden Rule, which says that we must treat others in the way we want others to treat us. When we render respect and courtesy to all citizens, there is a greater tendency for them to return that respect and courtesy. In the Philippines, citizens are generally compliant to instructions of uniformed agents of government such as PNP personnel. However, that compliance must not only be based on fear brought about by the threat or actual use of force by police officers. Respect for the rule of law and civilian authority. Human rights-based policing is anchored on the rule of law and recognition of civilian supremacy. From the term law enforcement, it is understood that there can be no enforcement apart from the law. Any act of enforcement apart from the law may be considered criminal, or at the very least, an abuse of authority. Respect for rule of law and civilian supremacy is best exemplified when the police practices accountability for all its actions, or, as the case may be, inaction on matters related to the protection of people's legal rights. Therefore, all police officers must always remember Article 2, Section 1 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which states that sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. Pro-democracy and pro-citizen. Human rights-based policing is democratic and citizen-centered. Democratic values are best demonstrated by the police when it seeks greater participation by the community in maintaining peace and order. The police organization must always remain responsive and relevant to the needs of the community, which is actually the PNP's clientele. Through dialogues and consultations with stakeholders, the police are able to learn about the issues and concerns that must be addressed at the community level. The PNP has 3 levels of human rights obligation: to respect, to protect, and to fulfill human rights. To respect human rights means refraining from interfering with the enjoyment of people's rights. To protect human rights means to implement laws that provide equal protection to all persons from human rights violations by state authorities or by non-state actors. To fulfill human rights refers to the act of establishing institutions and implementing systems, mechanisms, or procedures that enable people to claim their right. It is also important for police personnel to be oriented about the Panther Principles of Human Rights. Panther is an acronym that stands for Participation, Accountability, Non-Discrimination, Transparency, Human Dignity, Empowerment, and Rule of Law. The Panther Principles of Human Rights were originally developed by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization for application in development planning. It is also incorporated into the Human Rights-Based Approach Development Toolkit of the National Economic and Development Authority and the Commission on Human Rights. The Panther Principles were first introduced to the PNP and other national government agencies during a training workshop entitled mainstreaming human rights-based approach in political development and governance sector in October 2010. Participation. Active involvement of the people in public planning and decision-making. Accountability. Recognition that the purpose of existence of the PNP is to serve and protect the public. Non-discrimination. Providing police service to all persons without any bias or prejudice. Transparency allows the public to gain access to policies, plans, documents, rules and regulations, and other information. Human dignity. The PNP values the inherent and immutable dignity of every person at all times without exception. Empowerment. Acknowledgement and full respect of people's capacity to think and act freely. Rule of law. Respect for legal procedures and human rights principles. The 10 basic international human rights standards for law enforcement officials, as outlined by Amnesty International and based on United Nations Law Enforcement and Human Rights Standards. Originally published by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the 10 basic international human rights standards for law enforcement are premised on the principle that international human rights law is binding on all states and their agents, including law enforcement officials. Therefore, all police and law enforcement personnel have the obligation to know, understand, and apply the following human rights standards. Standard 1. Equal protection. Everyone is entitled to equal protection of the law without discrimination on any grounds, and especially against violence and other threats. Standard 2. Respectful treatment. Treat all citizens and victims of crime with compassion and respect, with utmost consideration for their need for safety and privacy. Redress procedures shall be expeditious, fair, inexpensive, and accessible. Law enforcement officers should also be trained in the needs of victims and should be provided with guidelines to ensure proper and prompt aid. Standard 3. Use of force. Do not use force except when strictly necessary and to the minimum extent required under the circumstances. Standard 4. Policing nonviolent assemblies. Avoid using force when policing unlawful but nonviolent assemblies. When dispersing violent assemblies, use force only to the minimum extent necessary. Standard 5. Use of lethal force. Lethal force should not be used except when strictly unavoidable in order to protect your life or the lives of others. Standard 6. Arresting persons on legal grounds. Only arrest persons if there are legal grounds to do so, and the arrest is carried out in accordance with lawful arrest procedures. Standard 7. Persons under PNP custody or PUPC's rights. Ensure that all persons under PNP custody immediately after their arrest have access to their family and lawyer. They must also be given immediate medical assistance whenever necessary. Standard 8. Humane treatment of persons under PNP custody. All PUPCs must be treated humanely. Under any circumstances, do not inflict, instigate, nor tolerate any act of torture or ill treatment, and refuse to obey any order to do so. Standard 9. Refusal to obey unjust orders. Do not obey, order, or cover up extra-legal killings or enforce disappearance, and refuse to obey any order to do so. Standard 10. Reporting violations. Report all violations of these standards to the proper authority within the PNP for the purpose of investigation. Do everything within your ability and authority to ensure steps are taken to investigate violations of these standards. Policing is human rights protection, is not merely a philosophical statement. It encapsulates the legal and constitutional mandate of law enforcement to uphold the dignity, life, liberty, and security of every person. Again, this is Police Captain Noricia Lerines, your Banyerong Police from PNP Legal Service.